This week on the Baseline Podcast, Josh and I talk about the big news coming out of the NFL this week. From Tom Brady saying he's retiring, but he actually didn't say it, to Aaron Rodgers and the big decision of staying in Green Bay or finishing his career somewhere else. And finally, is Ben Roethlisberger a great quarterback, maybe even a top 5 quarterback of all time? And we finish the day by talking about baseball and the big controversies going on with the Hall of Fame and the decision to not include Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, and so much more coming up next on the Baseline Podcast. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Baseline Podcast with Ben and Josh. We're back at it. He's in Indiana. I about said Ohio. Wow, that's bad. I'm in Hungary. I survived a sandstorm. No, I'm just kidding. It was just a lot of wind today here in Hungary, but that's besides the point. Episode 20 of the podcast, and we are going to be discussing some interesting topics today. Could be some controversial topics. Could have a lot of people that hate us. I hope not, but you know, it's opinion based, and that's what's going to happen. So we are going to talk about a little bit about football, a little about some of the news that's happening right now. And then we're going to talk about baseball. And I think everyone, if you pay attention to sports, knows what's going on with the baseball world in the sense of a Hall of Fame type stuff. So we're going to start with Josh. What are we going to start with and explain kind of what we're going to be talking about in this realm of today?
Yeah, Ben, we're gonna kick it off with some NFL talk. Some notable names have been stepping down, and I know you're about the same age as me. I'm feeling old right now. These guys that I've been growing up watching basically since childhood are, falling off one by one. Peyton Manning, I think, was the first big one back. I think after the 2016 Super Bowl steps down. Last year, Philip Rivers steps down. Mm-hmm. This year, big time news with Ben Roethlisberger stepping down.
That's a big one for us.
It is a big one. I never was very fond of Ben, being a fellow Browns fan like yourself. Yeah. I think Ben Roethlisberger currently has the most wins in Cleveland Browns Stadium, so that's always something that's been annoying, that a quarterback that doesn't even play on the Browns has the most career wins there. That's how bad and terrible it's been to be a Browns fan. But Ben, I was skeptical. I was definitely a hater as a kid. I still am not the greatest fan of him or any other Steelers player, but he's just the longevity he's had in his career and the consistency and the Super Bowls. I'm not sure that there's many people that doubt his Hall of Fame status. Yeah. I think people would debate whether he's first ballot. I don't think he's like on that level of first ballot. I think that's supposed to be just the elite of the elite.
Yeah,
but quite a career. It just came at the expense of the Browns oftentimes. So it wasn't the most enjoyable to watch. But how do you feel about Ben? I think you have a little bit more positive of take on Ben.
Well, I think I'm with you in the sense that, he played for the Steelers. Obviously, as a Browns fan, it's, Josh and I went through a lot of bad years as Browns fans. It's not like my dad, who grew up in the kind of the good age of the Browns and all that. But I will say, I think I have a softer spot for Ben because he grew up in my dad's hometown. He's from Findlay, Ohio. My cousins know him. Like he's like he's like, his family is like, was pretty cool. Obviously they've all moved out of Findlay, I believe, but he's always like, obviously he started off kind of rough in the NFL. We all know the stories, the allegations, all that stuff. But actually, when you hear his testimony, and as two guys that, Christian guys that believe in, kind of redemption in the sense of what God has done in his life, I think in that sense, for me, has kind of made me ease up on the the not liking as much, because you hear how he's taking football. And I think you're seeing this a lot with the veterans now that are retiring. They see football as like their will of what they do, but especially these Christian guys, they see it as a tool. And now Ben's like, hey, it's time to spend time with my family. This guy's going to be set for life. We both know that. I mean, he's never going to have to really work another day in his life if he doesn't want to. I would say from a football perspective, I've always just been enamored at his arm strength. Like, the guy somehow never could get sacked. I mean, he would take 5 hits in a row.
Ben. He's Big Ben for a reason. And even linebackers struggled to bring him down.
I'll be honest. Okay. This is a shameful thing as a Browns fan. I have a Big Ben poster in my room.
You don't.
Yeah, okay, listen.
Is he wearing a high school uniform or a college uniform?
No, it's a Steelers uniform.
Oh, no.
So this is the thing. So back in the day, obviously my name's Ben. I grew up in Ohio. There's a lot of Steelers fans in my school. And so my nickname became Big Ben. I was tall. It just, you know how it is when you're tall.
You could be Big Ben Wallace or
I know. So the funny thing is that every time I go in the room, it's like funny because like my brother has his Bengals stuff up. I have my Browns things. We also have a LaDainian Tomlinson poster on the wall, which I don't know where that's from.
Kind of random, but I love LT.
Yeah, and so it's still there, and I think part of it is because of the whole connection with Finley. And like I kind of give it as a pass in the sense like, okay, we have connection because he's from my dad's hometown, that sort of thing. Because the funny thing is with Findlay, Ohio, it used to be a huge Browns city, huge Browns, love the Browns. And then when Ben got drafted, it like that just switched, said, yep, screw loyalties. We're all for the Steelers. So yeah, I would say though, my feelings are like, I think I'm with you. He's close to first ballot, but I think he just didn't have the success like a Peyton Manning did his whole career, or like Tom Brady did his whole career, or Drew Brees. I think he kind of tailed off here the last few years, and I think that's going to affect him in his status.
Yeah, the last few years, at least, while he did have longevity, I think he was 39 when he retired. He did start to have to deal with more injuries. And I think you could also argue that those Super Bowls that he won early on in his career were more so Jerome Bettis and the defense and things like that, because that steel curtain was no joke. But, I mean, I respect the change in life, too. Like, Michael Vick went through a similar thing with the dogfighting and stuff, and at least Tony Dungy says that like he's definitely changed and learned from his time in prison. Ben obviously didn't have to do prison, but it was looking like he might have to do that for a minute there. And I know people will doubt,
of course,
naysayers about whether he actually did or change or anything like that, or not let, I guess, him be forgiven or like get another chance. But
I think it's also though, I think Josh is like the idea of like, I always like the old saying, like, it's not our life, so why worry about it? Right. Like, it's like, it's not our place to judge him. Like he made a mistake, but haven't we all made stupid mistakes? Haven't we all? And I think that always seems to hinder guys when they go to the Hall of Fame. They have like this black flag that's over them, like this, they've done stuff or whatever. And I
like
think
Terrell Owens, for example, I think that's
exactly.
Guy that should have probably been a first ballot based on the numbers and talent he had. But the voters, they were sticklers about his attitude towards the media, towards his teams. Like he definitely was, I think, a cancer in some sense. He'll argue against that though, and obviously because he's TO and he's going to defend himself. But just because of that, the voters affected their vote, and they're like, nah, we're going to wait till like third ballot, then we'll put you in.
Yeah, and like that's where I think, I think as sport writer, and this is where I think this day and age of sport writers and this is not you, Josh, but I'm just saying in general, I think a lot of sport writers have gotten this whole thing about like, what's going to make us stick out and not what makes the player stick out. Like your job is to report on the player or to vote for the player, not for what stance you're going to take. Like I get it. If you have the freedom to do that, that's what this country's for. Right. But it's the idea, like if the guy has the numbers, and I think we'll talk about this in the MLB side of things later in the show, but if you put the numbers up, like look at Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, he deserves to at least be second ballot, if not first ballot, at least second ballot. I think he'll never be a top 5 QB of all time, maybe not even a top 10 QB of all time. But the dude also has over 60,000 career yards. He's has over 400 career touchdowns. Like the dude deserves to be there, no matter what his backstory is. The same with, I think there's a lot of guys that are in that same boat that will they make it or not? I think he's one of them. Drew Brees the year before, he's going to be one of them that makes it. And it's completely funny because Drew Brees is complete opposite. Like his story is overcoming injuries and living out his faith, whereas Ben Roethlisberger is learning from mistakes and then living out his faith, which is really cool to see how those two combine.
Yeah, the Hall of Fame too, like at least numbers wise, I don't know if you can use, I mean, numbers play a factor into it, but I like to bring up Joe Namath as an example.
Yeah.
Because that guy, I don't think rarely, if ever, topped 3,000 yards in a season. He retired with more interceptions than touchdowns. He quite often didn't even complete half of his passes in a season, but he won a Super Bowl, was one of the top QBs in his day, back in the era where it was very run dominant, smash mouth, and passing was still not very fully developed. But he's in the Hall of Fame because he was one of the better quarterbacks of his day. So I kind of feel like, we got an era where guys are just throwing 4,000 yards routinely, and they're going to be passing all these Hall of Famers in like the total yards.
It's a different age of age. It's a different day
so
and
I
age.
don't know if you can necessarily do numbers. I think you have to look at how did he rank in his era of play, like among his peers. And I think Ben does rank pretty high among his peers as well.
Yeah, and I think too, I agree with you too, is like, that's like the whole conversation of, LeBron James versus, Michael Jordan, or Michael Jordan versus Wilt Chamberlain. I think that's three different eras, and that's three different positions. That's three different type of people. It should be, hey, what is LeBron versus Kobe? What is Michael versus, whoever, throw it in there, Wilt Chamberlain versus whoever, whatever. It's the same idea. Like, I think in football, and I agree with you, is that football, we should be based off of who have you done the most against, right? Or, in your era, look at Drew Brees and Peyton Manning. They are two of the best against their, I would say it goes Tom, then Peyton, then Drew, then, throw someone else in there. I think someone's similar, and you might disagree with me on this, Josh, but I think, Rivers is in the same situation as Ben Roethlisberger. I think they're very similar. I think Rivers, in the way their numbers are and stuff.
Manning and Roethlisberger were all in the same draft class, were they?
Yes, they were. Yeah, I believe so. I
know Manning and Rivers were, because they had like the draft trade, but I want to say Ben was in that class.
Ben was in it because the whole thing was they thought Ben was going to go ahead of Rivers, I think, but then it ended up not happening. There's a whole, but he was in that draft class as well. So yeah, I think, what is your thought on, do you think, out of these last few quarterbacks, so Brees, Rivers, and Roethlisberger, who do you think out of those three would be first ballot? I think we can agree on it, but I want to hear your take on those three.
I think if one was to be first ballot, it'd have to be Brees, right? I don't think anybody has more 5,000-yard seasons. I don't think anybody has more 70% completion percentage seasons. Like, the guy was just straight up accurate and good at what he did. Yeah.
So I would agree with you. I think it's Brees, and then the
only thing that's going to hold Brees, I think, is maybe the lack of Super Bowls, because with a guy that had that much talent, you probably would have liked to have seen at least one more appearance, but he only had the one appearance, and he did get the ring. But then you can look at Rivers. I mean, he never got to one, and then it goes down from there. But I think if we're going by the way that, Brees looked like a first ballot Hall of Famer to me, man. Like, nobody was throwing like him, really, like, except, like you said, Brady and Peyton Manning.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think we both can agree on that. So we talk about Brees. So, Josh, who does that lead us into also talking that recently stepped down, who is not a player, but a coach? So who are we talking about? It might be, you might, if you're smart enough, you'll figure it out, but who are we talking about?
Yeah, it was kind of the guy that, along with Brees, rebuilt the city of New Orleans, Sean Payton. Yeah. Head coach. Both of them come in there and transform the Saints, transform the city after Katrina hit. Mm-hmm. And Peyton decided to, I don't think that they used the word retire, but step away. So
he stepped away.
He's only 58 years old. I think he could maybe just be taking a break, but Sean Payton's also a smart man, and he sees how high over the cap the Saints are. He also just coached a season without Drew Brees for the first time and saw how miserable
hard it was
trying to coach a season with Jameis Winston and Trevor Siemian,
Taysom Hill,
and without Michael Thomas.
Which by the way, I want to pause there real quick. You want to know who's the most overpaid, ridiculous contract? It's Taysom Hill. I'm sorry. People love Taysom Hill. The dude is not worth that much money. I'm sorry.
Well, he's only going to get that money, I think, if he plays like an X amount of snaps at quarterback, correct?
Dude, I think so.
But million if he plays enough games at quarterback.
But it's still like Winston,
still making an insane amount for like a receiver tight end, hybrid.
Like Winston. Like Winston, I would get if you're paying him a decent amount of money. Like, Winston's not bad. He's a good keep the ball until you get drafted quarterback. Like, this is why I've said I think the Saints are going wide receiver in the draft. But then there's also me that goes, yeah, but they might, if they got a quarterback sitting there, they might just say, you know what, screw it, because there have been a lot of hires there since Peyton's retired. I know Josh McDaniel today, as we're recording this, is being named the Raiders' next head coach, by the way. Fun fact.
I haven't seen that yet.
It was breaking news before I got on here. So
wow.
I'll look into that more later. But about Sean Payton, these are my thoughts, Josh. I believe Sean Payton will go down as one of the best offensive minds. Not offensive minds, I shouldn't say that. Best, I think one of the best CEOs of a team. not offensive minds, but CEOs. What I mean by that is like, he knows what he wants and he's going to go out and get it. And that's what he's done his whole time in New Orleans. I think this is a question I'll ask you. Do you think he's a top 15 coach of all time? Top 15 or 20?
See, that's tough because I don't know a lot of coaches, but I mean, when you think of great coaches, the guys that I think first come to mind are guys like Vince Lombardi and Bill Walsh and
John Madden,
Bill Belichick. Like those got to be like the first five that most people think of. And then there's so many coaches that I just don't know. I'd have to write them all down and see them all in front of me. But I don't really know if I am as high on Sean Payton's legacy as most people.
Yeah.
I think what him and Breeze did coming to New Orleans and like growing the city and transforming the organization and winning a Super Bowl, like that's going to be one of the coolest football stories of all time in itself. But there were also several times where the Saints were missing the playoffs or getting eliminated early. And then, like I said, only the one Super Bowl appearance. So it's really hard for me to say like top 15 coach all time now, or even like one of the top offensive minds all time. So I think the transformation of New Orleans in itself was awesome, but I don't know where I would put him in the all-time talk. I don't know if I'm that high.
Yeah, I would say like I'm not necessarily. I don't think I'm high on him because I think rings definitely show a lot. I think if you're looking at coaches, right? I mean, you look at basketball, the sport of basketball, or anything else. Like, if you win a lot, look at college football, right? We think Nick Saban is the greatest of all time. Why? Because he's won championships. He's put it together. And I think the same with Sean Payton. I think Sean Payton was very blessed that he had a Drew Brees because I think we saw what happened when he didn't have Drew Brees. And I think that also shows a little bit, right? Like, I think you look at Nick Saban, when he hasn't had a quarterback, they've still been good. When he has a quarterback, they've still been good. I know that's comparing NFL to college football, but it's the same mindset of when they've had a quarterback versus not a quarterback. And so I'm interested to see like if he gets another job, if he decides to coach. When I hear the word stepping away, my first go is, okay, I wanted to get away from the situation I was at. And I want to wait a little bit and find a better situation. That's my thought. I don't know about you, but that's the kind of way I've been thinking about this. Like when he says stepping away.
Yeah, that's the same thought I have. He's only 58 years old, and I think he just knew that the run was over. I guess the Saints had to have thought very highly of him to keep him around that long because we don't see head coaches get tenured that long anymore. Like Mike Tomlin, Belichick, and John Harbaugh have all been with their teams for quite a while. Through some thick and thin.
It will never be the Browns, by the way. It will never be the Browns. We all know that.
Yeah. But I think I just read this morning that Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, who both were hired as head coaches in 2017, are now the second and third longest tenured coaches in the NFC. So it's like these teams don't really give their guys a chance. And it's sad though. They jump ship.
But it's sad though, right? Because I think we grew up in an era, right, where you had Bill Cowher, you had who else can we think of? There's a lot of these coaches that were around for a while, like when we were kids and
it just
growing
seemed like
up.
they got more than 2 years to get
exactly. Like I've always said this. I think my dad said it pretty well once. He's like, you have to wait till they get their group of guys in, right? Like in college football, we say that. And in, I think NFL, we say like, wait 2 to 3 years before they get their system in going and running before you really judge them. I think that's the same with Stefanski in Cleveland. I think they give him 1 more, maybe 2 more years. And if he's not proven himself, he's going to be out. I mean, it's just the way the game works. I don't want
to jump ship on him because it's like, man, we're finally like in a spot where we're being competitive. I know we're like, we didn't do it to like the best of our ability this year.
Of course, yeah.
We left a lot on the field. But if we're going to jump ship on Baker and Stefanski after like this was Baker's 4th year, Stefanski's 2nd year, like we really haven't learned anything from what we've done in the past, and we probably deserve to suck for all eternity.
Yeah, that is true.
But anyway, back to Payton though. What were we talking about with him?
Well, just like what we thought of him as a coach, but then where do we see him in the Hall of Fame? Like what? Not in the Hall of Fame. Sorry. Like where do we see him going next before that whole Hall of Fame? Yeah. If the Hall of Fame happens,
I see him as the same as you. I think he's gonna wait till another good situation comes up.
Would you say that
that'll be? I don't know just yet.
I mean, I think To me, I think
it could be a couple years down the road too. It might not even be a current one.
I mean, I think he's going to NBC with Drew Brees. I think they're going to team up on NBC, 100%. I think that's going to be a whole combination right there.
That'd be a broadcast I would never miss.
Payton and Brees show. It's going to be like Tony Romo on CBS, right? So we have that. But then there's this other interesting part of not college football, NFL that's going on right now. And I think we both are in the same thinking about this is we're not talking about the big, Tom Brady situation. We might mention it here at the end. We're talking about another quarterback who is maybe looking for a new team this offseason, maybe will retire or might stick it out. Who would that be there, Sir Josh?
That's going to be Aaron Rodgers. And we mentioned the cap situation that the Saints are in. The Packers are right behind them in second for that most over the cap. So they almost have to rebuild. They have to figure out ways to either cut money, cut some guys. They got to figure out how to pay Davante Adams if they even want to do that. I'm going to assume that Davante is going to want money similar to what Michael Thomas got, who set the record for most money, I think, per year, or maybe total for a contract by a wide receiver. And I think Adams is going to want something similar to that. And if they have to pay Rodgers like money to stay,
he already said he's not. He goes, I'm not coming to a rebuild, and I don't want to take a pay cut. He said that for years. He doesn't like taking pay cuts. It's not like. I will say, though, I want to point out that's the difference between him and Tom Brady. Tom Brady's willing to take a pay cut for the team. I'm just going to point that out there. That's all I'm going to say. Just going to let that out there.
Yeah. Rodgers has made it clear that he does not want to be part of a rebuild. And Green Bay also said, we are not rebuilding. But I don't
believe that one bit.
In denial right now. I think they're in denial right now.
So I'm going to give you two scenarios. Okay, Josh, we're going to look at this in two different ways. All right. If he stays with Green Bay, what do you think has to happen in order for Aaron Rodgers to stay in Green Bay?
Aaron Rodgers is going to have to beg Davante Adams to take $1 million a year salary. Because if he stays in Green Bay and they don't rebuild and they can't keep Adams, what do Packer fans and Rodgers apologists always say? He doesn't have any weapons. So that's going to leave him with Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Allen Lazard as his two main receivers.
Dude, with those two names, I mean, you can't go wrong.
They're very cool names. Maybe even Aaron Jones has an argument for being wide receiver one along with running back one in that situation too. But
hey, just get Taysom Hill. Just get Taysom Hill. They're all set.
He's a running back and quarterback and tight end and punter, blocker, offensive lineman, all those things.
All those. So
quite value, yeah.
So you basically are saying if he stays with Green Bay, there's going to be.
I don't know how they get to keep this whole team together. I think if he stays in Green Bay, he's going to want the bigger contract. They're going to have to cut some very important players or let some very important players go. And they're not going to be the dominant team that we're used to seeing Green Bay be. So it's going to hurt Rodgers staying in Green Bay as much as I think it would help.
Yeah.
I don't know. Stayed, unless he was able to take that Tom Brady level pay cut.
Yeah, I would say, I think I see. I'm in the mix here, right? Like, I think he'll stay. I think the only way he stays, right, is I agree with you. There's a pay cut coming, or he kind of talks in the whole Tom Brady talk. Hey, we bring our whole team together. Hey, we're going to win this, right? It's not like the MLB where owners can just pump in cash and say, hey, we're going to, or like soccer over here in Europe where people just pump in millions of dollars and say, hey, spend it. That's not how it works. And I think that's what makes football unique, because you don't have super teams. It's very hard to make a super team, super hard to make a super team. So I agree with you. I think right now it's very unlikely Aaron Rodgers stays a Packer. I'm just going to say it now. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
Think about this. Could you ever imagine as a kid Peyton Manning playing for a team outside the Colts, or Tom Brady outside the Patriots, or our dads with Joe Montana outside the 49ers? Like, he joined the Chiefs at the end of his career. It's becoming more, even Brett Favre. Like, Brett Favre leaves the Packers and then makes a bunch of random stops at the end of his career. So I don't think it's too wild to say that Rodgers is not going to be a Packer for life.
No, and so I think well, I'll say this. So what do you think? So this is the other scenario, right? Scenario one of him staying. Scenario two, he decides to go somewhere else. Give me your top what's your gut feeling on if he leaves? Where would be the place that you see him kind of go head out? I think there's a place that I think might be on both of our heads right now, but I'm interested to see what you say.
Yeah, I mean, there's a handful of teams that I guess you could say don't really have a plan at quarterback right now. I think most teams in the league either have their franchise quarterback,
or developing one,
or a developing one. Yeah, exactly. That's what you would call like a Trevor Lawrence or a Justin Fields, for example. Not elite yet, but they're not going to jump ship on him yet after 1 year. But I think right now, especially after their head coaching hire, the Broncos might be, I guess, the front runners in Vegas. I don't know the odds right now, but they just grabbed Green Bay's offensive coordinator. And a friend of mine who's a Broncos fan said that this was a move that the Broncos made to try to lure Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams over. So I don't know what kind of relationship they have with this OC, but apparently they must really like him, and could be enough to draw them to Denver.
See, I also heard that, but I also read that Schefter came out and said, which we'll talk about Schefter in a bit. I also came out and Schefter said that it was not their plan. They went for the best hire. And I'm like, really? A guy who has zero head coaching experience? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was
there's guys out there like Brian Flores and Todd Bowles and Byron Leftwich and Leslie Frazier. Like, I don't know if this dude was on many teams' radars.
I think I agree with you. I think Broncos are it feels like the Broncos are just like that old quarterback's destination.
They haven't been willing to, well, here's the other thing. They haven't been bad enough to get like a top 1 or 2 pick to get that quarterback. So they've always been kind of in the middle, and they've been having to get like these bridge quarterbacks or like these mid-first round picks, like just picking what's left over.
Yeah.
And they've been able to address all these other situations, like receivers very good right now with Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler. They got Noah Fant at tight end. They drafted Javonte Williams at running back, who's looking like he's going to be a stud. The defense is pretty solid.
They have a good offensive line, not too bad of an offensive line.
And then they've been throwing out guys at quarterback like Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater and Paxton Lynch, and it's not been that guy. Like, I've said this about the Colts since Andrew Luck's retired. Like, they look like that team that's a quarterback away, and I think the Broncos are in the same situation where it's like, man,
what do you think?
Had like that QB that wasn't bad. Like,
so let's say he goes to the Broncos. Do you think it would be like a 1-year deal thing, or would it be kind of like a Peyton Manning thing where it's like a 2 years and then like he goes from there? Like, what do you think? Would it be like more a Tom Brady situation, or would he sign like a 2-year deal to guarantee him more money? Like, what do you think be the plan behind that?
Yeah, with him being 37 too, you can't imagine that it's going to be anything long term. Like, I think it would be like a 2-year deal, basically to guarantee that he'd be there for more than one season. But it works out for both sides because then they don't have to commit to paying like a 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers if he falls off a cliff. And Rodgers also gets to make more money if he proves that, he's still Aaron Rodgers when he's 39 years old, when said 2-year deal comes up.
Yeah. And so now we haven't talked about the third option. Third option is he retires. Now I want you to take these 3 options, Josh, and I want you to think about us here. What does your gut tell you percentage-wise for each? So if we have percentage for him staying with the Packers, going to a separate team, not the Broncos. We're not saying it's the Broncos. We're not breaking news here, okay? We're not Adam Schefter. We make sure we have all the facts first. Sorry. Well, I'll mention that in a bit. Or he's retired. What is your percentage gut feeling there for each?
Yeah, I think joining another team is going to be the highest percentage. Right now, I think Aaron's legacy is pretty set. I don't know that he could do anything to ruin it right now, but he definitely could do a lot to improve it, because in the Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers discussions all the time, what is the glaring deficiency there? It's the Super Bowl rings. It's 1 Super Bowl appearance, 1 Super Bowl ring on Rodgers' side. And I think that if he went to another team and it didn't go so well, I don't know if that hurts his legacy so much. But I think he has everything to gain by continuing to play. Like, he played at an MVP level this year, so it's not like he's falling off. It's just if he's still feeling like mentally there to play, like, I think he can still do it. Obviously, he's been proving it that this new breed of quarterbacks that can just play till they're 40 years old almost, or past 40, he's one of those guys. So I'm going to go ahead and say playing somewhere else is the highest percentage. Staying in Green Bay is going to be the highest percentage. And then retirement, I think would be the lowest, just because I think he wants to.
He still has some left in the tank. So what would you say? Do you think it's? So you think it's probably what, 60%, 70% that he goes to another team, or do you think it's more?
I'll go 70% chance he leaves Green Bay. I'll go 25% chance he stays in Green Bay, and 5% he retires.
All right, and so for me, I have to agree with you. I think it's about I'm going to go more 80%. I think it's going to be 80% he leaves. I don't see him staying. To be 100% honest with you, he was fed up with Green Bay before the season, and I think he's now at the point where
that's another thing that plays into my speculation too.
And his offensive coordinator's left. I mean, what's left there? So I think 80% he leaves. I think 25%. I agree with you on staying in Green Bay. No.
Here's
15%. 15% stays in Green Bay. 5% he retires. I also agree with you.
Another thing too to consider is how okay, I guess, is Green Bay with letting him walk, knowing that they have Jordan Love in the locker room, a guy that
stop
they
it.
Stop it. Okay,
Jordan
I'm not saying that Jordan Love is the answer. I'm just saying, do you think that Green Bay would be okay with Rodgers leaving? Maybe more so than most teams, because this is a guy that they traded up to draft in the first round, passed up a lot of great receiver prospects like T. Higgins, and took a quarterback that they didn't even need at the time. I'm not saying he's going to be Rodgers and he's going to replace Rodgers and basically be Rodgers 2.0. I'm just saying maybe Green Bay isn't as mad if he leaves as maybe another team would be.
I mean, if you had Justin Fields behind him, I mean, Jordan Love, when he's been in the game, has looked, I don't know, like he's been there long enough to should have learned the offense really well. And when he's been there in the preseason, I watched him in the preseason a little bit. I know it's preseason, so I'm saying a lot, but I don't know. It just seems like I would, if it was Trey Lance or Justin Fields or guys with, I think, more upside, right? I'm not saying maybe Jordan Love will become the greatest of all time. I have no idea. But what I am saying, upside wise, are they sure they have it? Because to me, it looked like a few years ago, what they needed was a wide receiver, and they decided to go with a quarterback, either to irk Aaron Rodgers.
That's what Aaron Rodgers wanted. I think that's what every draft analyst predicted they would take, and what every football fan, no matter how hard they followed the game, knew they need a receiver.
And I think that just goes to show that you ticked Aaron Rodgers off long before anything else. So again, I mean, yes, they're fine with Jordan Love. Do I think that guy is going to win them a lot of games if they do have him? We'll have to see. We'll have to see. And so, yeah, it's kind of an end of an era, I think, for what we grew up with. And before we move on past this, I think there's a really big thing that was announced, but not correctly announced. I don't really know. So, Josh, what we all thought and started crying about might actually be just a ploy. I don't know. And what would that be, Josh?
Did Tom Brady actually retire, Ben? Because we've heard Adam Schefter report it. We've heard a lot of other news outlets.
But Josh, it's Adam Schefter. We have to believe him. He's always correct.
Well, I would say the reason that you shouldn't believe him is because Tom Brady hasn't said anything. The Bucs haven't said anything. Bruce Arians has said he hasn't heard that, and that apparently Tom's not even close to making a decision yet. So it's kind of I haven't heard from Tom yet, so I'm doubting this report right now. I think Adam might have fallen for a troll, or maybe an intern that was trying to jump the gun, maybe wanted to be a little bit relevant, and he tricked Adam.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think it's a little fast. I mean, I hate it because I posted on Instagram, all these different, too. I was just all sad about it.
Take it down. I was like, well, if he does end up actually retiring, after all this, maybe he just hasn't decided to retire yet, but in a week he will.
I mean, he did come out, I guess, and say that if he does make a decision, he doesn't want it to be a distraction. And I think this has become a distraction, and maybe he's waiting till after the Super Bowl and says, then I'll make a decision. I agree with you. I think there's just a lot of misunderstanding, misinformation. Oh, wow. Misinformation in this day and age. No, I'm just going to leave that there. So my thing for you, Josh, and my question, I think we both can answer this. Does your feeling say that he's done? Because I think we talked about this before we went on air. Well, before the show, we talked about how we both feel like this is a different Tom Brady than it's been the last few years. Not play wise, but just the way he talks. Can you kind of go on that and explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, like you said, play wise. I mean, I think he just threw more yards in this season than he has in any of his other seasons. Now, maybe that was also because he played the most games he has in this season with the 17 games this year instead of 16. But nonetheless, he topped 5,000 yards. He looked like the Tom Brady that we've been growing up and watching for the last 40 years or whatever it's been. Yeah. But the way he's talked has definitely been different because Tom has wanted to continue playing as long as he possibly could, it seems like, until I think he's even been on record saying he wants to play till he's 50 if his body can handle it, and that he'll retire like when he feels that he can't play anymore. Now, if Tom just played like arguably the best football of his career these last 2 seasons, I don't think that he's at that point where he thinks he can't play anymore. But since the season has ended, he has said some things along the lines of like, it's not fair to my wife to see me on the field getting hit like this. There's more to life than just playing football. I want to be able to have some more time being a dad and spending time with family and things like that. And it's just, we haven't heard language like that come from Tom yet. And it seems like he has said everything except I'm retiring. Like it's all out there. Like, it's like, well, it sounds like he's saying he's retiring, but he hasn't said those words, I'm retiring, yet.
It sounds very similar. I talked about this before the show. It sounds very similar to a Drew Brees conversations we've heard, to the Ben Roethlisberger's conversations we've heard, just how it's family. There's more to life. There's more to life than football. And it's shocking to hear it from Tom, right? Like Tom Brady, we've always noticed the ultimate competitor. He wants to win championships. But I think and I think this goes to who they are as people. I think they realize that, hey, I'm spending way too much time doing the game that I love. And I don't think as Tom Brady's gotten older, he's been involved any less. I think he's just realizing, hey, my boys are getting older. You know, I want to spend time with my wife. And so that's where like part of me is like, I understand, like people will think, well, you're at the top of your game, but we have to remember these people are human. They've been doing a sport for 20 years. They want to spend time with their family before their kids grow up and leave. You know, like LeBron James, he's come on record saying, hey, once my son plays one season, I'm kind of done. I don't believe that. Like LeBron's just a different animal. Like he's the guy that would play until his son is. By the
time that Bronny is in the NBA, if he's one and done, or if they decide to let high school kids come up by that time, LeBron will be, I think, 39 or 40. And it's much better to play at 40 in the NBA than the NFL.
Well, it is LeBron James, though, and we all know how much money he spends on his body every year. But going back to the Tom Brady thing, what is your feeling, Josh? Do you feel like this is the end of Tom Brady? Is this the end of an era? Is this the end of, because if he retires, I think both of us might cry, really, because I mean, for us, these have been the quarterbacks that we grew up our whole life. Like from the time we were young kids playing football outside, we used to say we were Tom Brady and Brett Favre and Peyton Manning. And now it's like you play, you know, Madden and you'd be like, I want Tom Brady on my team. And now it's like, we're looking at this and going, man, I miss it. I miss the old days of football. What is your feeling? What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely looking forward to being an old head someday when I'm 60 years old and telling kids that my era of quarterbacks, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, Ben Roethlisberger, was much better than these, you know, yahoos that they got in the league today that are throwing like 8,000 yards back when the NFL decides to make tackling illegal and playing defense illegal because that's how it's just progressing, right? But I would definitely be a little bummed out that I wouldn't get to watch Tom anymore. I mean, I've been a Tom hater most of my life until this run he's had with the Bucs. For whatever reason, it's just I hated Tom Brady and Bill Belichick together, and then after they split,
it was like the Emperor and Darth Vader. That's what it was.
Yeah, after they split, it's just kind of like, well, I don't really have a reason to hate either one now, but I still wasn't a fan yet. But then when Tom won with the Bucs and took a franchise that has just kind of been dysfunctional and totally transformed the culture, made it a winner, and won at like what the heck was he, 43 or 44 when he won the Super Bowl. It was just like, I mean, that was really the last thing that Tom Brady had to prove, right? That he could win a ring without Belichick.
Yeah, and he did. Now that
he's done that, I don't think that there's anything left for him to prove. Like, what else is there for Tom to do in his NFL career? He's had like
go to the Browns.
Twice the length of career as most NFL guys get. Like he's had like 2 careers really.
Hey, he can go to the Browns. I'll take him. I'll take him for a year.
His last achievement is to win a Super Bowl for the Dallas Cowboys, right?
The Cowboys or the Browns, one of the two. Just get one of us a Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, but I don't think that Tom has anything left to prove. So if he's feeling this way, which is kind of wild to think that he's played this long, but it's also kind of like, man, it's finally done now.
So what do you think?
I think he might be retiring just because we haven't heard him talk like this yet.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think this is it. I think this is now, even if Adam Schefter was wrong, we haven't heard Tom Brady come out and say, "Oh, Adam Schefter's wrong."
He hasn't refuted it yet. Either.
That's what I'm saying. You haven't heard Tom Brady go, "Wait a minute, hold up."
He hasn't said I'm retiring, but he also hasn't said I'm not retiring.
Yeah, and so that's why I think this could be different. I think in the sense that Tom has kind of decided, you know what, maybe y'all are right. Like maybe this is time for me to go. And I think his wife has a big say in what happens, whether he'll ever say that. I think if his wife is, he came out and said something about like
I think that played into him going to Tampa.
Yeah.
Begin with, because it's in Florida, and I think that was the location she wanted to be in because of how cold New England is.
Well, let's be honest. Who would want to live in New England? No offense. If it's not even New England, it's Boston, but same. So with that, we've talked about the NFL. There's a lot of eras ending, really, Josh. And I think for us, and I'll wrap up the NFL with this, is that I think it's weird to think that we're now at the age where all of our childhood stars are leaving. You know, we used to hear it from our dads, and now we're hearing it from ourselves. And that's super surreal for me.
I feel it, man. I feel it.
It's super surreal. Like I remember, and like it goes the same with like college football in a sense, like all these new coaches come in. I'm like, I've never heard of these guys. Like, who are they?
There's so many guys that I have no idea who they are. When I was a kid, I could tell you everybody at every position.
Exactly. And I think that's what I miss. I miss that. But the same, you know, it's good for the game. It's good to evolve and to keep moving on. So, and speaking of moving on, we're going to go from the football field to the baseball diamond. Yes, we're talking baseball in January. You're right. Because it's almost spring training. Believe it or not, it's right around the corner.
Will it be, though? Because Rob Manfred is doing a lot to screw up the lockout.
Well, you know, Josh, positivity. Except when you got COVID. No positive, negatives. As my boss says at work, by the way, he says, "Stay negative, my friends." And I'm like, okay, well, that's just got two connotations.
What a guy. What a guy.
So we're going to talk baseball, and I think we're going to talk about something that's been very, let's say, could be frustrating to people, could be a skeptics to many people. Who knows? Whatever it could be. Josh, we love the game of baseball, correct? We like watching baseball. It's a very great sport.
Baseball is my favorite sport all the time, and they tell me I'm wild.
And the point of baseball, right, is to win, obviously, World Series, but also stats are a big part of baseball. It's what helps us have the history of baseball. Helps us
drive the game in a lot of decisions.
Exactly.
Make coaches look like idiots.
Exactly. So my thing is, we had two people that were on the ballot for the 10th time, which means so premise to everyone, once you're on the ballot for 10 years, you are now off the ballot. And the only way you can get it is I think it's like the Veterans Committee or something like that.
Yeah, basically, I think Jack Morris and Alan Trammell recently got in the Hall of Fame on that.
So basically they get you in after that. So right now it's voted by writers, which, oh boy, wait to hear me on this one. But Barry Bonds, as we all know, is the home run king and might be one of the most intimidating hitters to ever have walked the face of the earth. And you have Roger Clemens, one of the best pitchers of all time, if you look at the numbers. Neither of them made the Hall of Fame. But yet...
But Ben, that's because they cheated.
Stop it. Josh, I get it. They took steroids. You know what? Okay, whatever. They took steroids. They cheated. We all talk about this. But there was a team not too long ago that literally affected the game as a team. And Josh, take over before I'm about to boil over into anger.
I mean, I think you have a much stronger opinion on if these guys should be in the Hall of Fame or not than me. I'm about as most on the fence as you can get. I just enjoy watching the debate because I think there's great discussions on both sides as to why they should be in the Hall or why they shouldn't be in the Hall. Some of those arguments being like what these writers decide, like they cheated, so they shouldn't be in. But then you just elected David Ortiz into the Hall of Fame, who has been busted for undisclosed drugs, but tested positive nonetheless for some performance enhancers. And they're going to leave all of these guys, basically a whole era that saved the game of baseball after the strike in 94. We're just going to pretend that whole time period from like 95 to 2003 never happened. And
that was some of the, by the way, that was some of the greatest baseball to ever watch.
It was
Sammy Sosa
if you
versus
think
Mark
that
McGwire.
Guys today are hitting home runs like at a record pace, like you should have seen like the individuals that were blasting home runs further and higher. Like they looked like football players too. Like, I mean, if you look at a baseball player today and a baseball player back then, or even like some of the transformations like guys Barry Bonds made, man. Like let me just tell you how intimidating Barry Bonds was. So probably Barry's best stretch of ball was from the year 2000 to 2004. He was 35 years old in 2000, 39 years old in 2004. He drew a total of, let me add this up here for you. He averaged 174 walks a season during that stretch.
Guys strike out that much.
He retired with the most walks all time, 2,558. He retired with the most intentional walks all time of 688. We all know about the time that he was intentionally walked with the bases loaded. Now, on base percentage, Ben, like we talk about batting average, I think a lot. And if you hit 300, you're pretty good. On base percentage also includes, I believe, walks and being hit by pitch. Yep. Barry Bonds, in his age 39 season, had an on base percentage of 609. Like at 2 out of every 3 times,
stupid.
The plate, he's getting on base. Like you'll never, ever, ever, ever. I'm going to go ahead and say you're never going to see a guy get even a 500 on base percentage. Like this guy was scaring teams to death. And not to mention like the 762 home runs and the 73 home runs he did in the season.
Well, this is my thing. I'm a Reds fan, right? Joey Votto, one of my favorite players. He gets 474 and people are like, oh, great job. You didn't do what Barry Bonds did, right? Like that's impressive. This is what I'll say. And this is my stance. Okay. You look at Barry Bonds before the age of like 31 or 32 or something like that. He had 400 or 433. He had like 400 stolen bases, 400 home runs. That alone gets you into the Hall of Fame. We all know that. That alone gets you in the Hall of Fame at some point. First ballot or not, it gets you in the Hall of Fame. My thing is, yes, he used steroids, but how many other guys do we not know of what they took? We don't know. There could be guys that got in the Hall of Fame that took stuff. We don't know. We have no idea. And did it affect the game? Maybe. Maybe it affected a whole game. We don't know. It could have just affected the at-bats he was at. But I'm interested to hear your side of this, Josh. Out of the two guys, who was more deserving? Like with Roger Clemens, I think there's more of a case that he should get in because there wasn't much difference. Barry Bonds, there was a big difference between the home runs and the on-base percentage. But you look at Roger Clemens, his numbers were very even throughout his career.
They really were. Like when you look through like Clemens' stats, it would be probably pretty tough to figure out when exactly he started juicing to begin with, because he was a 2-time Triple Crown winner. One time when he wasn't juicing, to our knowledge, and then another time during that stretch where I guess they say that he was juicing. But, I mean, this dude was constantly in the league leaders for, all the big stats like strikeouts and ERA and innings pitched and things like that, wins. Like when he was 23 years old, he led the league with 24 wins and a 2.48 ERA. Fast forward to when he's 35, he leads the league in wins with 20 and a 2.65 ERA. And then, like I said, you had a Triple Crown season when he was 34, but he also had a Triple Crown season when he was, let me find it here for you. When was that other one? He had a Triple Crown season, it looks like, when he was like 24 or 25 as well. Or no, excuse me, 28. 28 and 34 were his Triple Crown seasons. But his ERAs are pretty consistent. His strikeouts are pretty consistent. Like, we assume that these guys started juicing in the later 90s, and when you get to that point, it's like it's really tough to say. Like, obviously Barry's home runs were affected by his steroid use, but he was a decent player before, and he would have eventually got in. But Roger looked like he was going to get in regardless. So I mean, there is that argument that, you know, they didn't need these things, but then again, why did they take them to begin with?
Yeah, and I think another thing on top of this, I think you'll test this. We also talk about Pete Rose thing, right? Like, that's, if there's anybody, like, I get these guys, right, not getting in. I get this. There's that whole steroid thing. Look at Pete Rose. That whole situation to me, as a Reds fan especially, is just like, the dude is the hit king, which it might be even more impressive than home runs. The fact that you got those many hits is just beyond me. And it's all because he betted on games he wasn't a part of, which is the other mind-boggling thing.
Yeah, and then there's also the Black Sox scandal from the 19 World Series. Guys like Shoeless Joe Jackson that would have been Hall of Famers, Eddie Seacott, Chick Gandil, I think are a couple other ones on that team that would have gotten in had that never come out. So baseball's kind of always had this reputation where they're not going to let, even if there's like a sniff of cheating, they're not going to put you in to the hall or like recognize any of your accomplishments.
And yet they allow the Astros to be World Series champs. I'm just going to put that out there.
That's the one thing I would like to see in this, because I don't really have a strong stance either way, whether these steroid guys should be in or shouldn't be in. But I would say, where the heck's the consistency? Because the Astros still have their World Series ring. They still have all those wins. None of them got vacated. And we're going to leave out Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens out of the Hall of Fame because they took steroids in an era where all the star players were taking them.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's an era of the sport or whatever.
Like, it wasn't like there was just Barry taking steroids and it gave him a competitive advantage over everybody else, because the Giants never even won a World Series. So these things that he was doing didn't really affect baseball in the overall landscape.
Josh Burris, thank you for making my point. That is all we have today. I'm just kidding.
Everything the Astros were doing with the sign stealing and the technology and the film and the trash cans and all that kind of stuff was affecting games and leading to wins.
Yeah, and again, the Astros have always been crap. So, you know, I mean, you have to give them a pass, remember?
It's kind of annoying that they're still good even after that. Like, they've been busted, and I'm sure they're not doing things anymore, at least to the extent that they were. You know, there's still that little bit of, maybe they're doing a little bit of something here, but they've been still consistently winning games and stuff like that ever since then. But it's still kind of like, okay, if we're going to have like this reputation of being sticklers about any kind of cheating, like, why do the Astros still have these things?
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I think the Barry Bonds, I mean, you also look at Sammy Sosa. I mean, the Cubs obviously didn't win this World Series in that time. Look at Mark McGwire. Like that right there. I don't know if you've ever seen the documentary on ESPN.
Did any steroid user, well, was Clemens on the Yankees when they were making their runs in the late 90s and the early 2000s?
He might, or he would maybe, or was he on the Red Sox?
He was on the team in the 2001 World Series. I know that, but the Diamondbacks beat them.
Yeah. So, but this is my thing though, is Josh, you have all these guys that first off, have you seen the documentary of Sammy Sosa versus Mark McGwire?
The 30 for 30 that they did? Yeah, I didn't see that.
It's really interesting. And it made fans watch the game. If fans love those guys, and yet you're saying, oh, they won't make the Hall of Fame because they cheated, then we need to look at everything in baseball. There's probably things that we've missed over the years that was cheating. That was even worse than that. Like, we don't know what there could have been because we weren't looking for it. And that's my other thing. Like, we weren't looking for it at the time. So, you know, and
also during that run in 98, man, Ken Griffey Jr. was on pace with all those guys for most of the season until he got hurt. And to our knowledge, he never took anything.
Yeah. And is it because the guys were buff? Like, I'm sorry. Like, look at WWE wrestlers. We all know they probably steroid up. Who knows? Like, but it's the idea, like, just because the dudes, like, I think about it now, like, they have all this testing. So obviously it's very hard to cheat. But there's obviously ways probably that outside of the Astros, there's cheating nowadays. We have no idea. What I do know is that stat-wise, you should put the best people that have had the best stats in the Hall of Fame, no matter what. Maybe you put an asterisk. I don't care. Put an asterisk next to their name. Be like, hey, they use steroids.
That's the argument I've heard is, what if you had like a room in the Hall of Fame, like called the steroid era or whatever, and these are all like just as a way to not necessarily induct, but recognize the era of baseball that was maybe the most exciting that there ever was. And I mean, it was huge in saving baseball. Like if
So
that,
think about
we
this,
never
Josh.
have all those home runs, is baseball even still around?
That's what I'm saying. Would you rather? This is an interesting question, Josh. Would you rather watch baseball back in the early 2000s, late 90s, or watch baseball today? Answer that question.
We're gonna go with the late 90s.
I'll 100% agree with you.
We're setting a lot of records right now for home runs overall as teams, because it seems like it's just super easy to hit 30 home runs in a season now. But we're still, even in this era of, like, it seems like there's so many home runs by teams, we're still not seeing guys even touch 60 or 70 or get into that range. Like, there were individuals that were just so big and strong and feared. And there were also playing like small ball too at the same time. Like there were these guys hitting home runs, but small ball was also still a thing in baseball.
Ichiro Suzuki.
Right now, right, exactly. Ichiro made a Hall of Fame career without hitting home runs, basically. So right now we're just in this situation where it's like home run or strikeout, it seems like. And back then we had home run or double or single or, like it was just, baseball was a lot more fun to watch back.
And I also think another guy in that story is Frank Thomas. Frank Thomas is another guy that was fun to watch.
Another guy that I believe never got busted.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of things. I mean, A-Rod's up for discussion too. Like, what about his situation? Ryan Braun's going to be another guy.
That's the other argument I think that people will make is like there were guys in that era like Frank Thomas, like Ken Griffey Jr., a lesser degree, Derek Jeter. I know he wasn't a home run here, but there were guys that had Hall of Fame careers during that stint. So it's like, okay, it was possible to do it. So why would we treat these guys like they're equal?
And also A-Rod, I want to use A-Rod as an example. He was really good before he took steroids. Like he was really good. A lot of these
guys were like I think the majority of them were. Like you mentioned Bonds, you mentioned Clemens. Mark McGwire, I think, hit 46 home runs as a rookie. He was with Canseco, though, in the same locker room, so maybe he was juicing up from his rookie season on. We don't know. I think Jose has talked about all that in his book, like who he's injected and when, like guys like Mark started.
Who's he's injected? Like he's got like a little clinic. Like here we go.
But before we talked, like we mentioned Ortiz. Like David Ortiz wasn't exactly this stud that we know him as until he got to Boston and was supposedly juicing. Sammy Sosa wasn't exactly a stud.
But I will even say this:
Sox or the Rangers, I think, was his first stint until he got to Chicago, and he even used like the cork bats and stuff.
Yeah, I would say with David Ortiz, like I read this earlier and I told you about it. Like he took a test in 2003. 2004 was when they first initiated the standard testing for baseball. 2003, he took a positive sample test. It wasn't released what it was. So they've used that kind of like as a way of saying, hey, you use steroids, but they don't actually know if it was steroids.
Right. We don't know if it was GH or
it could have been pot. It could have been pot. We have no idea. But it's the idea that this was over his head, and so was it over Barry Bonds, and yet you let the one guy in.
First ballot, mind you. I think Ortiz first ballot.
It is first ballot. And so there's a lot of other guys in that like Scott Rowland almost made it this year. He was at 63%, which I think he deserves to be in. That's just me.
Falling out the door. Yeah. Actually, another name that we haven't hit on, Ben, and it wasn't even because of steroids or anything. It was more so his opinions off the field, and that was Curt Schilling.
Oh, yes.
Do you have a hot take on Curt Schilling? Because I think that there's the argument out there to leave these guys that took steroids out of the hall, right? But what the heck exactly is the argument for leaving Curt out? Because in my opinion, these writers are just kind of butthurt by some of the opinions that he's had. And he's had some strong takes and said some things that I don't exactly agree with, but everything he did on the field was, you got to believe, with integrity. One of the best postseason pitchers that we've ever seen in our lifetimes. We're always going to remember the NLCS MVP season
bloody
that
sock.
he had with the Diamondbacks in 2001, the bloody sock with the Red Sox, I believe, in either that 2003 or 2004 World Series. 2004, actually, yeah.
But I'll say this.
He's worn a T-shirt, I think, that said like something about lynching journalists. And I think all the Baseball Writers of America Association, whatever the heck it is that votes on this, were like, well, that's offensive to us, and we're not going to let Curt in anymore.
I'll say this, and I said this before the show. I said this during the football thing. I believe writers should be not biased. No, I'm serious. Like your job as a journalist is to report what's needed to report. And when you're asked to vote, you vote biased. You vote not biased.
They do things like this, like the Terrell Owens thing with waiting till the third ballot, they're just making it about them and finding a way to insert themselves into the discussion that they really did nothing to be a part of.
Yeah, and this is my thing. Some of these writers weren't even alive when this was going on. Like, my biggest issue with the media, and I'm not going to try to get too political here on a sports show. We're trying to keep this, sport related. But what I will say is that I feel that writers nowadays are getting so involved in everyone's lives that they're not willing to do what their job is, which is to report what needs to be reported and to share the story. And sharing the story means, hey, if this guy's good enough to get in the Hall of Fame, let him go to the Hall of Fame. That's what it should be.
Like, is Aaron Rodgers not going to get into the Hall of Fame because he didn't want to take a COVID vaccine? Is that going to be a thing 10 years down the road?
It could be. I'm 100% with you. It could be. Like, that's the craziest we live in now. Is it's not about what they've done. It's about what they've said to somebody else or what they did to this person or that person, and so on and so on. If that makes sense.
I mean, we'll see if even Ben gets to be into the Hall of Fame, right? I mean, if we want to get it's discussion.
It's the reality that we live in, and I think.
But writers, I'm with you. Writers are finding ways to make it about them, and it's kind of annoying.
Yeah, it is, and I think that's the crazy thing. And I think to finish up today, Josh, I want to get your opinion on this. I mean, you're obviously in the journalist world of things. What do you feel as sports today in today's world? Is sports still the sports we've always known, or do you really believe that sports has become way too about everything else in the world? Because I know for me, I love watching sports because I get away from all the chaos that's going on, and I can just enjoy watching a game of football or watching a soccer game here in Europe and not care about the elections coming up or anything like that. What is your take on that as someone that covers sports and is involved in sports?
I think it's definitely different than what we grew up in. Like, I guess a team taking a political stance when we were a kid would be the New York Yankees saluting the New York Fire Department in 2001 after the December 11th attacks.
Yeah.
Like, that was about the only political stance, or like to that level, I guess, that you would ever see. There wasn't anything that was ever as divisive as is now. Like, not everybody has to have an opinion on everything. Like, even Michael Jordan would never back a political candidate or endorse a political candidate because Republicans buy sneakers too, is what he said. Like, he just refused to make it about anything like that. And it was just all about keeping it about basketball when it was on the court. So I think we definitely are in much different times right now, whether it's for the good or the bad. But sports, and I think for that reason, sports were always everybody's way to, I guess, escape the chaos. It was a way for people of all colors and of all beliefs and ideologies to be able to at least agree on one thing, that we are all Cleveland Browns fans today or all Cleveland Cavaliers fans today. And nowadays, it's not even like that anymore. It kind of sucks.
And it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch even over here in Europe. I'm like, wow, I was trying to get away from, I'm living here in Europe. I'm not trying to listen to American politics when I'm watching a football game.
Do they do things, I guess, in like the Premier League and things like that over in Europe? Like, what do they? Because they're not going to be protesting the same things as they would, I guess, in America. Like, they probably don't care about American politics, or do they? Like, what do they?
I mean, Black Lives Matter was pretty big here in Europe, and in the Premier League, it's a lot about like different rights of people. I mean, you can go on and on about that. Here in Hungary, it's not as much. You don't see as much protesting. It's more about sports. Like, if you go watch a soccer game here in Hungary, you watch a soccer game. It's more in Germany, France, and England is where you see more of the protesting or the teams making a statement. Actually, Hungary's kind of on the opposite. They're kind of getting told they're not making a statement. So there's a whole bunch with that. I could go on and on about that. But yeah, so I mean, it is, I see it, but I don't see it as much. And so I guess for those of you out there that are watching this or listening to this on your radio or wherever, just remember that sports are about bringing people together. We all love sports. That's what makes sports great, right, Josh? Like, we can debate about sports and still love each other, still care about each other at the end of the day. But don't make it about your political belief because that person believes something different than you. Now you can't enjoy a soccer game or a football game. It should be about what really matters. And that's, hey, let's get away from the world we live in. Hey, you're a Democrat, I'm a Republican. Who cares? Let's go cheer for the Browns. I hope you agree with that. I think you agree with that, Josh. If you want to say anything on that, and that end anyways.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of have the same sentiment, like, imagine, obviously sports aren't exactly as important as maybe some of these political issues and discussions out there that affect a lot of people. But imagine if I despised you completely because you're an Ohio State fan. I just never wanted to associate with you or anything like that just because of like that one thing. Like you don't agree with everything that I line up with. You don't like the Florida Gators. Well, screw you, Ben. I am off the show now.
Yeah. I mean, that's reality. So I think that's the message we want to send is just be positive and just really enjoy sports. And so we talked about baseball today. We talked about football. You know, we covered 2 sports. I mean, that's a plus for us. I mean, we've covered 2 sports today. Next week, who knows what next week's going to be out? We'll see. But before we end the show, Josh, as I always do every week, I always have a question to ask and ponder, and I think so hard about this. I thought about this one in study hall the other day. So I was monitoring study hall, and I thought of this. So, Josh, if you could go, like in high school, you know, you had your friends, right? Like your core friends. If you had, let's say, 3 famous either athletes or let's go athletes that you could say like these guys would be fun to go to high school with, to just hang out with, do things with outside of school, inside of school. Who'd those 3 athletes be? If you had a choice between 3 guys that would just be like, dude, this guy would be a blast to be with, 100%.
So we're looking for like a friend group, not necessarily to hang out with when they were in high school, but just
exactly. Yeah. Like if you had that person, like that whole, like him, if you all were at the high school at the same time, no matter how old they are, if you were at high school at the same time, who would that be? Those like 3 people.
Yeah, that's a tough one because I think there's a lot of fun personalities in sports right now. Like I'm thinking of like Taylor Lewan and Will Compton that do Bussin' with the Boys at Barstool. Thinking of Pat McAfee, another fun guy off the field. Probably be a blast to hang out with. So I imagine it would probably that would weigh in a little bit into it, as well as guys that I've just kind of admired from a distance and enjoyed watching. So a couple of those things would probably play into this here. But let me think of this too, because I will give you 3 names, and I know you're not going to let me get out of that anyway.
Oh no, 100%. I'll let you think. I'll give you my 3. All right, so you can kind of see where I'm going.
You say your 3, I'll continue to think.
So my 3, Pat McAfee was one of mine, just because I think the dude's hilarious, and I think it would just be, he's like a class clown. I think it'd be hilarious to have in class with you. It would like take the pressure off, right? So I think him. I think one of the guys I looked up to, Bronson Arroyo. I don't know if you know who that is. Pitcher for the Reds, right?
Ben, when I was a kid, I knew every player on every team.
Yes, and so that's the thing. It's like I loved Bronson Arroyo. I loved the leg kick. That was just kind of like I loved. My dad's going to hate me that he's watching this right now, and he probably hates the fact that I said Bronson Arroyo. He hates Bronson Arroyo. And I would say 3rd would probably be. Ooh, this is where it got really tough for me because I was debating between 2 people. I would have to say, just because of like the person that he is, I would have to say like a Drew Brees or someone like that. That's just like really like calm and cool and collected and kind of keep me like in tune with the world, right? Like not going to make me stressed out a lot. So this would be my 3. So Drew Brees, Bronson Arroyo, Pat McAfee.
I got you. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and throw Pat McAfee into mine as well.
Dude, he's great.
That's just kind of a no-brainer. Pat seems like a real bro and can talk. I mean, he's into a lot of spaces. He can talk a lot of sports. He's always down for a good time. So
I mean, he's a WWE wrestler, man. He's a WWE wrestler. Some of the stories
that he shares on his show too of stuff that they did in high school and college too just sounds like absolutely hilarious. Like it would have been fun to be a part of. So I will throw Pat into mine as well. Let's see about these other 2.
I know you got someone that like you looked up to that's like that guy would have been cool to have with, just like hang out with.
Yeah, I'm thinking through all that right now.
Josh has way too many people that he looked up to as a kid. Too many heroes.
Man, yeah. I want to say Charles Woodson.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And the reason for that is because not only because he's a college football legend or because he's the only defensive player to win a Heisman Trophy, but he grew up in Fremont, Ohio.
Went to Michigan. Ugh.
He grew up in Fremont, Ohio, though, which is 25 minutes away from where I grew up. And he was actually taking classes at Fremont High School at the same time that my mom was teaching there. She taught high school Spanish. Unfortunately, she never had Charles as a student, but he was in the building when she was teaching there. So there's kind of like a hometown hero kind of connection there that I think would be cool to link up with. So we'll throw Charles into there. And then for my third, I really I want to, and this will probably be a pick that you'll appreciate too, Ben, is Brandon Phillips.
Ooh, I didn't even think of Brandon Phillips. I just posted something on Instagram. Off with the
Cleveland Indians and then basically blossomed and had the best years of his career with the Reds. So he spent a little bit of time on both of our teams. And Brandon he always seemed like a fun guy on the field. Always a big smile, very fan friendly. He always seemed very active on social media. Would take a picture with any fan, sign anything. So he just seems like a really friendly, solid dude on and off the field.
Fun fact.
I like Brandon. He was never one of like my all-time favorite players, but I mean, he seemed like great with the fans.
Fun fact, Josh, I know you follow me on Instagram. If you haven't, follow me. And you know that I posted something the other day about Brandon Phillips.
I did. That was what made me think of that.
And if you're watching, he responded right there.
Oh, he did. See, I mean, he's replying to like fans.
And then he posted. He like reposted. If I can get it to focus there, he reposted it. So he said I'm gloving it, which I think was just a great little phrase. But even going back farther than that, he once again, this is a full conversation I had with him.
Oh, no kidding.
So,
man,
I'm just saying, like, he's like a really cool guy.
You just validated everything I said.
Yes, and I hate it because I didn't choose him, and now I look like an idiot. And if he's watching, gosh.
Well, you've already hung out with Brandon, man.
I wish I would have. I'm mad.
Virtually, you have hung out with Brandon.
Golly, I wish I would have. Dang it. Now I said all that. I look like an idiot. I had Bronson Arroyo. My dad's going to sit there laughing because I put Bronson Arroyo over Brandon Phillips. But, that is what it is.
I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could go with this because, like I said, Brandon was never one of my all-time favorite players. Like, there's guys on the Indians that I enjoyed watching more than him, obviously, because, I mean, he didn't really have his best years until he went to the Reds. But you got to respect guys like that. And there's more guys in the league like that right now. Like Freddie Freeman seems to be that kind of a player too, that just, how do you hate Freddie Freeman? Like, what can you point to that Freddie has done or does that is just like, I hate that guy. I don't think
and like
Brandon had a similar vibe.
I mean, that, like, I have on my phone, I will hold on to that for the rest of my life. Like, that's just the coolest thing for me. But anyways, I hope you all have enjoyed this episode of the Baseline Podcast, Ben and Josh. And we'll be back next week to talk about who knows what. We'll probably have our Super Bowl preview.
That's definitely going to be
because that's going to be happening. And then we'll also recap some of the storylines of this past week. So if you've loved this on YouTube, go ahead and click that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. That will let you catch up on all the old episodes that we've done over the last few weeks and let you see all the new videos that will be coming out here very briefly. I have a great interview coming up on my other podcast with Dr. Jeremy Irvin, who's a former Cedarville professor doing some great things in Ohio. That will be coming up out here in the next week or so. So that'll be really cool. And if you're listening on Spotify or any of the other podcasting platforms, thank you for listening. Make sure you add a 5-star, make it all up top. But anyways, thank you so much, Josh. Thank you for again tuning in. It's always a blast. We love talking about sports. So
it was a good one.
That's all of our talk and all of our time for today. I hope you have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you.